we thought we'd mix it up a bit with two panels today. The first is Identity Matters. We've got one of the ASC committee, AJ Johnson, who will be chairing the session. I don't think he gets a fancy chair. I think he might have to actually, ironically, being a chair, not getting a chair. But he'll be looking after the session, along with Sarah Ramanauskas, who is from Gambling Integrity, who used to be a researcher. You'll tell people more, I'm sure. Used to be a researcher? Apparently. Client side. I think that's how we met. Now working outside of the sector. Shifra Cook, who was here last year from Ayda. And finally, a reprise from Debrah from the MRS. Please welcome our panellists.
Comment about me being short? I do. Taller than I normally am. Thank you.
Okay, so the session will have about 30 minutes or so of us discussing things, and then we will throw it open to all you guys to contribute as well. Get me notes. Okay, so the session is around identity, playing on a lot of what we've already heard today. That's quite bright. I'm quite old. I've been around the industry a long time. My career started in the 1970s when I would go with my mother to Millward Brown hall tests and operate the video machine and observe how these things worked. And people would be dragged off the street and they'd be asked some questions and they would record their name and address. And then the supervisor would occasionally just grab them as they left and just run through to check they were who they were and whether the interviewer had done a good job. It was fairly simple at that time. You know, we were just focusing on whether or not the interviewer was doing their job and collecting the right information. If I forward into the 90s, when I was at university, I and a few friends used to go to groups, focus groups, as many as we could, because we got cash, which meant beer. So we would go there and we would turn up and on different types of products, always, of course, swearing we used them and trying to pretend we didn't know everybody else in the room. So I suppose in some way that was a light-hearted fraud that everyone sort of seemed to accept happened. If I then forward into, I suppose, probably 2009, end of the noughties, I think it was mentioned by Ray earlier, Kim Dedeker, P&G really called out the industry about panel quality. And I was at Ipsos, and the agencies had to pretend to be friends and try to come up with plans on what they could do about panel quality. And I think Melanie was probably part of that. You know, I've kind of left a bit of consumer research in the last decade, but listening today, clearly these problems have not gone away. If anything, there are now more things to be concerned about. So really what this panel is about, well, if we know who people are, then we can control the quality. You know, we can distinguish between bots and real people because we can collect more information from them. But that would be a perfect world. And obviously things are not quite like that. Consumers are rightfully scared of giving personal information online with the rise of the rise of frauds and nasty things that happen when you give your data over the internet. Consumers have rightfully understood the value that their data should have and therefore seek a fair exchange for the participation they give. And the exchange of that data. And therefore, it's not a done deal that they will give us this data that helps us to identify them. As we've heard already today, survey design is not necessarily getting much better. We're asking people to do things, not always giving them good rewards for doing them. And therefore, what is in it for the participant to want to give us that level of data? So that really, I suppose, is just the introduction to what we're going to talk about today. And I was going to introduce the panel, but JT has already done that. So I will kick off with that's not the right page. A question, I think, Debrah, could you kick us off? Put my glasses What keeps you, or what keeps the industry organisations awake at night when it comes to identity and participation in market research? Do you think there is a fundamental risk in the future of the market research industry?
Short answer, yes. But I probably need to give a longer answer, really. I think, there's sort of two opposing forces that are at the root of this problem, I think, which is that, believe it or not, most members of the public can live long and happy lives never taking part in market research. They will be quite fulfilled never having to take part in a survey. And so getting people to want to take part in research is a challenge. And if we don't give them a good experience, if they don't feel positive after they've been through a survey experience, they are less likely to do it in the future. They're less likely to say that they've had a positive experience. They're more likely to go onto social media and talk about what rubbish they've just done. So so we've got one issue, which is we desperately want to speak to people who are genuine people, but we've got to try to keep them engaged. And then on the other side of things, we've got increasing fraud and the need to dig deeper and to ask more to be sure that the people that we're speaking to really are the people that we think we're speaking to. And so, in effect, you've got two opposing forces. By trying to confirm the identity and be sure that the people you're speaking to are genuine, you're actually more likely to create an experience where you're pushing people away. And so it's how to reconcile that push and pull factor is one of the things that keep me awake at night. I won't go into the other things because, that's for my psychiatrist.
And do you think we are going in the right direction of trying to find that right balance?
No, if I'm being honest. I think that survey design and bad survey design still is such a significant issue. Surveys are too long. They are too boring. They're asking questions that don't necessarily need to be asked with the data that's not necessarily being used. When I first joined the society, which was quite a long time ago for those of you who know me, I remember getting a complaint where somebody had been asked 99 open-ended questions about vacuum cleaners. But the issue is I'm not convinced that I won't see something like that next week. And that, I think, is still the root of the issue, is the bad survey design and not really sort of being tough to say, no, this is too long. Half an hour asking all these questions, that's just not going to happen. We need to address that issue, and that is still something that is as problem today as it was 20 years ago when I joined the society.
And do you, and this is to the panel, all the panel, do you think that the bad survey design, the asking too many questions, negatively affects the quality of answers, but also does it affect their willingness to give their identification?
Yeah, I think so, because again, when you're taking part, when you give your time to do something, you want to feel it has value and it has worth. And if you're actually asked a whole load of things that don't make sense to you and it's boring, and you know that actually you're coming to a point where you're just saying yes, 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 just to get to the end of it. If you don't see that it has value and worth, then also, why should you then be wanting to give so much of yourself just to confirm who you are? It's almost like, well, you didn't care enough about my experience to make this a good experience, so why should I care enough and give loads of information about myself to you so that you can actually verify that I am a genuine person? I think it's a social contract. The research is a social contract between the researcher and the participant, and that social contract is starting to break.
Hello. I used to be a researcher, so I was a client at Betfair and then William Hill, and then I was on the agency side, and now I'm neither, so I can kind of say what I like. And I think that often, for you guys who are not clients, the issue is that your client doesn't have access to data from within its organisation, right? So your client comes to you and says, oh, I want to ask these 73,000 questions about Hoovers. Actually, probably quite a lot of that information is already available to them within their organisation, but they don't know how to get there, who to ask, and what to do once they've found it. When I was on the agency side, one of my most successful research pieces was when I used the actual client's data as well as quant, as well as qual. So if you've got a client who comes to you and says, I want to ask 73,000 questions about Hoovers, really ask them, is this data available elsewhere, before I go out and try and find people to ask the questions that you really need answers to.
Yeah, I think we see that. So I'm Shifra. I'm CEO and founder of Ayda. We're a platform technology business. Essentially, we decentralize panels and enable our customers to build their own. And I think we see that. I'm very much involved in the tech scene, in research repositories, right? And the rise of that, it's absolutely meteoric in terms of actually having existing data and access to data that your business already has, so that you're not running the same surveys, or asking 99 questions on Hoovers. I think the thing there is it's difficult. That's a difficult thing in itself as well. The categorization, sort of being the librarian of that, is a difficult piece. But that's massively on the rise, and that's going to have a huge impact, and already is, on our industry, because you don't need to ask as much, right? There's less research.
Okay, and we're going to come back to the best practices and motivations a little bit later. Well, I'd like to dig a little bit with Sarah, because you're wearing a different hat with regards to representing the gambling industry. And if we in market research are going to have to get more deeper information, personal information, about our participants to make sure they are who they are and that they are giving us appropriate data, we could learn perhaps a bit from the gambling industry, which has probably tighter regulations. Can you explain a little bit about how it does work, or does work in the gambling industry?
So most places around the world, if you want to sign up to an online gambling account, you have to give certain pieces of information, which are then validated through a third party. So your name, address, and date of birth. And if you want to open a gambling account, you're quite happy to give that information because you expect to do that. Yeah? It is something that has been established. It's something that the regulators obviously expect, but it's something that is just part of the process. And I think that's, the opportunity really for the research industry is to join together and make it part of the process. Now, the issue with that is it's more expensive. So I think somehow we have to kind of lift the tide, clients and industry together, lift the tide and say, look, if you want proper responses from real people, you have to pay for it. You can't just go out and pay, I don't know, I don't know the amount, but it used to be what? 50p, something like that per response. You can't do that anymore. If you want real information, real people, you have to pay the cost to do that. And so within the gambling industry, as I say, it's now absolutely expected that if you want to open an account, you have to give information. But you get something back for that, right? You get the opportunity to gamble, which some of you around the room might want to do and others might not. But again, that's kind of educating your respondents as well to say, you've been through this process with me, thank you very much. Thank them, engage them, give them a pat on the back and say thank you very much. You're now part of this, and we are going to build something with you. And there's that kind of social contract, which I think we'll probably talk about. You, Mrs. Respondent, you've joined in, you've given us your information, thank you very much, and now you're going to be part of this, which is going to be interesting, useful. We're going to tell you about what we're doing with it. So at Betfair, I had a customer panel, and what they really wanted was feedback on, well, what happened? What difference did I make? I've given you this feedback, what happened next? What did you do with it? How did I make things better?
So I think with introduction of best practices, if I guess with more barriers, people having to give more information, there may be less people willing to join panels. But if there is then a cost increase, do we think that clients are ready to come on that journey with us? That if they want the quality, it comes with a premium cost? Because I always think that they want everything, yet not necessarily want to pay that premium.
I think what we'll see is a polarization in the sense that synthetics will be, in some senses, good enough and will be hugely cheap, obviously, and fast. So there will be fast and big and good enough, and then very high quality, but a lot smaller and more expensive. I think you see that across many industries where there's been this kind of polarization, and the kind of middle sort of gets kind of bottomed out, if you like. And I think that my prediction is that that's what we'll see in MR.
I think also one of the other things as well is that when the cost question comes in, usually the discussion doesn't go the way that you expect, which is, are you willing to pay more? The discussion will go, so what other approaches and ways could we do this? And it then pushes towards different modes, different methodologies, and so on. And so, actually, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem, because there's not one single solution, one single research approach to being able to answer a question. And obviously, with the rise of passive data, and things, and also things like synthetic data, there are lots of alternatives out there. And so I think it's going to be very difficult. I mean, this kind of commoditization of research is a pathway that we've gone down, and we have to live with it. We can't turn back the clock and be able to sort of take that all back. And so it's almost thinking, right, so from this point in what we have, how can we then bring in the clients to then have that quality discussion where they might be prepared to pay more? One of the things one observation I'd make is that when I look at trends of methodologies over the years, in terms of, when I started in the sector, online was like zero. Now online research is over 60% of all research that's conducted in the UK. But the one constant thing that has been throughout that time is face-to-face has been 20%, and it continues to be 20%, because there is that need with that. Whatever happens with other technologies, there's still that need to contact people, to see people, and I think that's where the potential opportunity is. The fact that there's that need for that reinforcement and verification of face-to-face, and I see that as potentially part of the solution.
At the beginning, the first session you presented, it was the list of stakeholders that are working together. Should clients be on that list as well?
They definitely should be. I mean, at the moment we're keeping it, if you like, to the supply and the supply side and the supply chain. But the clients will need to be involved. But at the next phase, it's when we've actually got things to talk to them about. Engage them with, because at the moment, there was a comment that was raised in one of the earlier sessions, is that if you speak to clients about quality now, the standard response is, that's the supplier's problem, and that is still the standard response.
And it's not going to be successful without it being a shared problem with shared solutions. Yeah. Okay. Shifra, you have a company that has developed technology to help manage the panel experience and to, I suppose, improve the quality of the panel. I don't necessarily want you to talk all about your technology, but how do you see technologies like yours being able to help in this challenge that we have?
So where I started was with incentive payments. So just backtrack a little bit, because it was a point basically in Qual, right? We were carrying loads of cash around. It seemed very strange. And what's happened out of the back of that is that we do collect date of birth, and we do collect someone's bank details if they choose through the platform to claim direct to bank. And that's interesting, because then we've got a point of verification, and then we can, and then the business is built from there, and we've built this ability for customers to build their own panels through the platform, and we've added on services based on the customers that we're working with. And so now what we've got is we've got an end-to-end process from the point of recruiting your own through to, there's a sort of point of verification at the end that you can apply retrospectively. And if you take a sort of macro level from where we sit, we get a bird's eye view across all customers. So what we can see from recruitment through to fulfillment are some, we can see bad actors. At the minute, I don't know what to do with that, because I can't say, here you go, don't include this person, because I'm obviously from GDPR, I've just shared information that was unknown to you previously. So what do we do with that? Do we start scoring people? We can end up in a murky place, and I don't really want to go there in my business until I can help you solve it, right? But ultimately I can sort of see that, and by joining up, right, by taking out so many players, or so many sort of organizations along the way, owning that end-to-end journey of the participant, albeit you can't have millions in Ayda. It's not built for that, but it's built for smaller, high quality. Then by owning that journey, you can actually start to ensure and put checks and balances in place that you've got real people who are who they say they are, who are good actors, and actually have the profile that they build up in the panel.
And is there a premium with regards to the amount of time or cost it is to manage people in that way than some of the other systems that you've seen?
So we're a SaaS platform, software as a service. So the expectation in that is that it's actually very cheap and self-serve, and that's what we've built. So yes, it's a premium product in terms of what you can do, but ultimately it's not tens of thousands. Yeah, it's and you have to do it yourself, right? And we enable you, and as the owner of that data, to take responsibility for it. We're not doing that for you. We're just giving you the tools.
Okay. And have you seen, with the development of features and creating a kind of a better experience, have you seen people be better, behave themselves, be more real people?
So anecdotally, I think from our customers, we see that they have high retention rates. They have people that high completion rates. They have people actually show up to the research if they're doing face-to-face. And so it's, because there's more accountability, there's more ability to just contact people, remind them. It's easy, yeah, because it's direct. There's no middle players. So yes, that whole sort of fulfillment piece is much improved, but what it's not going to deliver you is 50,000 people, 100,000 people, right? It's a smaller scale but higher quality. So there's a trade-off there, which is kind of back to the point I said earlier, where I see sort of smaller, high quality, and very large being probably, in some instances, probably AI will start to steal the march there.
Thinking about who we're saying about the clients, do you think they would accept smaller samples of higher quality people?
Well, so it's interesting. So our customers are research agencies predominantly, and then we tried going in-house to insight teams inside large corporates, and they don't want to touch it. Yeah, they want to throw it over the fence. They don't want to go near the participant. It's too. It's almost like there's been this sort of downward pressure on the participants at the bottom, and it's sort of like, I don't want to touch that. It's not me. We don't do that. Kind of chuck that over the fence to over there. They can deal with it. But where we then go is in-house into product development teams and user research, who are like, bring on the tech. We love the tech. We want a direct relationship with our user, and it's really strange because they're doing the same kind of work, but obviously for a different output, right? For product development, R&D, and that's where we end up as a business, because that's where the opportunity right now is. Because talking to teams at P&G, they're just like, no, we don't want to go there at all.
I think it's an interesting area to get into then, because I think, Debrah, you talked earlier about face-to-face, and it's quite accepted in face-to-face that you have to provide some some personal information be identified. And for communities that do with product development, I mean, a good client is probably seeing them as an extension of their product development team, and welcoming them, and obviously want to know them because they are, really helping them on their product development pipeline. It's a bit of a generalization just to say people don't want to give their identity, because I guess, think about the census, so what is it about certain types of research that people are willing to give more personal information, and other types of research they're not?
I think the census is a good example. So the last census that we had in England and Wales, the response rate was 97%. Now, obviously, people feel compelled to it. There is a legislation that underpins that, but there was also 97% is really very, very good. The reason is people feel invested in the census data, whether it's because they know that census data is going to will be used to decide whether they're going to have a new hospital built in their borough, or if they're interested in, I don't know, their ancestry and they just want to use census data to understand more about their family tree. There's an investment in the output, and they know what they can use it for. And I think that's true more generally. If you kind of look at sort of response levels across different types of research, social research does do very well. Response rates for social research are very high. They have to be, because actually government as a buyer of research might expect 60 to 70% response rates. But actually many social research projects are very long, going back to the point about kind of long data collection periods. You get some where you literally will have an interviewer in someone's home for nearly 2 hours. They might also take blood work. They might also measure your height. I mean, really quite intimate stuff. But people will do it because they feel invested in the outcome. Whereas, again, I can't believe there are many people that really want to spend their time answering 99 open-ended questions about vacuum cleaners. So the topic is one. The type of research project, what you're expecting people to do, is another, because again, qualitative research does continue to have good response. It has better incentives, so there is the kind of the give and the get, but also a lot of people do enjoy doing qualitative research, and that you get that feedback. I mean, obviously MRS is the regulator. We receive complaints. We don't receive many complaints about the research experience of doing qualitative research. We get a lot of complaints, and I mean a lot, it's the majority of complaints about the panel experience. So I think there is. I think the evidence is in our complaint data suggests that what happens within the panels. Admittedly, you're talking about much more data points, so there's much more data collected that way. But even so, when you look at it, there clearly is something that is different in that experience compared to something that is more on the qualitative side.
Perhaps that's because the clients are going, well, I'm only paying £2, so I don't value the respondent. We as, I'm now putting myself back into the industry, we as an industry, I think, don't value respondents enough. We think, oh, well, we're only paying X, and therefore the client's only paying X plus a bit. But so, that isn't really worth very much. But it is, and I think, respondents want to see that value exchange. And if we're not paying very much for them, it's like, well, just buy some more. Oh, chuck them out, get some more. They're not right, chuck them out, get some others.
Yeah, I think
it shouldn't be like that. These should be human beings, as we were talking about, that you've recruited, you recognised, and you're now having a value exchange with.
I think you're absolutely right. I think research operations more broadly is seen sort of at the bottom of the food chain, completely unglamorous, and just a sort of nasty sort of back of the garage kind of thing. And if we don't pay attention to it, we end up in a kind of situation that we're in, right now, really. And like I said, that sort of constant downward pressure. The research, the glamorous bit is the sort of the insights and the, I don't know, there's lots of new technology around sort of facial recognition, all this sort of thing, right? But actually, the people just, and who deals with the people and how you get the people is just not wanted to be known, and so it needs more air in the industry, right, as opposed to just being a sort of afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, think back of how I guess the industry started, which was much more about observation, and that classic picture of the person sitting on the step in the corner of the room, watching the house for days upon end. I mean, that's people used to let that happen, but now, I mean, where does it leave? The Coca-Colas of the world, where they want low-cost, quantitative, 25, 30-minute surveys that are, let's be honest, fairly dull. I mean, is there a future in that? Can it be rebuilt to be able to put the value to the participant and change the pricing and change the processes? Do you see that happening?
Well, I think one of the points that Shifra raised earlier was very interesting, which is about that if you can see the value of what you're doing, and if it's kind of recasting that conversation, I suppose. But also, I think there needs to be a much more quite straightforward discussion with the clients, which is, okay, so you want to do this 30-minute data collection exercise. What's in the business? How much of that data do you already have? Can we strip this down to 10 minutes? And actually to have those kind of conversations. And I'm afraid also that also does require a bit of sacrifice from the supplier side, because it might mean that you're actually getting less, that the contract is going to be worth less. Not worthless, but worth less. But actually, it could be a much better project that produces much better insight. So it has to be a two-way conversation. It can't all be clients and it can't all be suppliers. It has to be everyone and having that conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that otherwise it will just be, carry on business as usual. And there needs to be a sense of education, I think, to the customer. As suppliers, it naturally is a different dynamic if you're a supplier and a client, right? Your ability to push back on the client and say no, especially if it means less money for your business, that's very hard to achieve. So you kind of need to flip the conversation. That's not a conversation that you can, that most organisations are going to feel comfortable having, pushing back and saying, but actually I'm going to be remunerated less. So yeah, it's not that. So there needs to be another way.
Okay, look, I'm going to open it up to the floor to comment on that, or other comments that you've heard earlier in the panel session, or any questions you have for our panel members. So, over to you.
I think it was you who mentioned about the face-to-face, going back to face-to-face with some of the sample. Are we going to see more of that, to make sure we're talking to real people, phone calls, the old traditional 90s, 80s telephone interviewing, cappy?
I don't predict the resumption of significant amounts of telephone. I think the telephone works very well in certain environments, B2B and so on, and for some consumer work, but that has decreased significantly. Whereas I say face-to-face has stayed constant. I think that also there is the thing with face-to-face is that you physically can see somebody, and even on telephone you can't see them, and there is a comfort from that. So I think what will happen with the increasing, particularly with things like AI and so on, is that need for face-to-face will still hold. I don't think it necessarily will increase it, because it's expensive.
Yeah.
It is expensive, and even those kind of traditional clients that have spent lots on face-to-face, like the government, and with kind of some of the large-scale sort of longitudinal projects and so on, they're looking for different methodologies and having much more mixed approaches. Things like the census, I sincerely doubt that we will have a census as we know it in this country in 2031, which is when it's next due to take place. It just can't afford it. We can't afford to do it. And so it would be this blended approach of different types of methodologies. But I predict that face-to-face will stay as a constant, because it's that assurance that we get from face-to-face that will continue to be there.
The way that we handle it, is that, first of all, you have to write something interesting about yourself as you join the panel. So that's like, how verbose are you? How kind of well written are you? And the second thing is you have the ability to record on your phone, just like a little sort of headshot. This is me. So there's, not everybody does that, right? But there is a sort of there is a barrier to entry there, if you like. But ultimately, people know that they get paid well and fast. So it's like, that there's this trade-off.
Just I suppose add my personal experience of face-to-face and telephone in the B2B space, which has been agriculture for the last 10 years. The interviewer plays a huge role in the quality of the interview, but perhaps even more importantly, the relationship with the farmer and the loyalty that farmer will give for many years. So having a person, and absolutely you can't be afforded all the time, but there is still real value of doing things traditional ways where you can do them that way. Right, another question or comment from the audience?
I'll go again. In other parts of the internet at the moment and technology markets, there are schemes starting to require age verification, and some of that's coming through legislation, particularly for over 18s. Would that be a way of introducing a question to say, we can only do our panel for over 18s, please prove that you're over 18, without it being seen as quite intrusive as currently?
The technology to check that someone is who they say they are is getting better and better and cheaper all the time. And I think, as you're kind of implying, it's becoming part of life. I now expect to have to do one of those stupid videos, sorry, where you sort of hold your phone up and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's something that is now becoming really quite prevalent. And I think that kind of acceptance that this is just something that you now have to do, it's part of your internet life, and the reduction in cost, hopefully means that it is something, again, that you can take to your clients and say, this needs to be done in order to get you the real insight that you're looking for.
Yeah, so on Ayda, we're an 18 plus panel, and the way that we do that is 97% of people that come through claim direct to bank, and they have to put their birth date in, and obviously their legal name, if they're actually going to receive any money, because obviously with the bank checks, it doesn't go through. So that automatically basically does that for us. Yeah. So there's no way to get your money if you're under 18. Yeah, go for it.
I've managed to break the microphone. Yeah, I think, again, age verification is, I think for most people, it's not that intrusive. So it's really, I think, is some of the other questions, actually things like financial data. There's much more sensitivity around, and actually looking at things like complaints and that sort of side, we get a lot of complaints still about some of the demographic questions that are being asked, because people don't understand why they're being asked. So I think there's also a job here about explaining much more about why certain information is needed. And treating people in a way that you bring them into the conversation, rather than just saying, well, if you don't give me this information, I can't give you your incentive. That's not a conversation. It's actually contextualizing it much more. I mean, I have a standard piece of advice, which it might sound trite, but I genuinely mean it, is when you think about a participant, think of them as your mum, okay? How would you want your mum to be treated if it was them answering this question or asking these questions of you? And then if you treat them like that you should, the way you hope your mum would be treated, then we might start to have better conversations with participants.
Excellent. Do you have another question or another comment, Jerome?
It seems like if you're going to get the bank account details of somebody, it's going to be very easy to deduplicate that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And I don't understand why panel companies don't do it.
I don't know either. So, like I said, this is where I started. I started this business as an incentive payments business because that was the problem that I had as a researcher. And then we kind of built from there. And it was like, oh, look, we can, we can't necessarily say that this person has 3 cats and they're doing a cat food survey. But over time, as you build up a picture of them, you can. But at the exit point, you can definitely tell what age they are and, that they are one person, right? Because not many people have multiple bank accounts. Lots of people have different emails, but not many people have different bank accounts. So it's a single point. Exactly. I don't know. You're welcome. Go take it.
Just more an observation again from the client side. What I often found really astonishing is we'd have pitches from maybe 4 different agencies, is how variable the price would be. And why is that? I mean, for me, the quality issue is about leveling up that price point. If you all raised your prices, surely we wouldn't be having this issue where somebody is seeking to undercut somebody else. Because as a client, but I would always go for somewhere in the middle, surely. I mean, you would sort of go in the middle. So maybe agencies, you need to be more bullish about raising those prices so that clients aren't then bidding at the lowest price point. Maybe that's what I would say, is be more bullish about that price point to raise the quality.
So could I ask you then, if you did get quotes and they're different, and one of them included some nice slide about quality and the processes that they do. They all do. Okay, but they right. Okay. I'm not sure. A cartel of market research agencies setting prices. No, do you want to?
Well, I'm going to leave the room if we keep talking about. I'll leave if we keep talking about prices. No, I was going to say on the issue with the bank accounts, the reason a lot of the big companies don't do that, there are real reasons. It creates a whole new level of data that they're going to have to protect. And that's expensive. It's very expensive. They'll have to have a whole new kind of encryption on their machines to protect that sort of thing. It creates a whole new barrier to signing up. And I love that your panel has that. And so there's no criticism, but you did say it was a slightly smaller scale. And so there's a scale issue at play. And so there's a type of person, too, that will engage with bank accounts, and there's a type of person that won't. So it ends up creating a frame issue. And so, I think that there's a place for all of it is where I'm going with this.
Yeah. So for context, unless the customer knocks out bank accounts and doesn't allow the participant to claim in that way, we offer a range of different things, but generally people want cash in their bank. So 97% put it in their bank, but we offer vouchers, but almost no one wants that. So it's just a byproduct of what people select, as opposed to us forcing them down a certain path. We're just like, if you want cash, have cash.
And a bank is preferred to PayPal, where I guess it's okay.
Yeah. I guess also because you've got a real range of people, and not everybody has a PayPal bank account yet, or an e-money account. Yeah, I'm sure that will change. We get a few crypto as well. That's sort of starting to sneak in. We see that people wanting to claim in crypto. We don't support that, but we kind of have that coming in. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's Well, you'd
have to do a lot of surveys to get anything in the crypto world these days, don't you?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. So they.
Okay. A question at the back. Let me right at the back.
Hello. There was a really interesting podcast by Jason Buchanan from Verve last year, and I'll cut a long story short, but what had happened is that parents had given their children their login to do surveys. And so children were then answering the survey as if they're a BMW owner. Their parents had done all the profiling, but the responses were coming from a child. So the parents were happy because their children were earning their own pocket money. the kids were happy because they were doing it with their mates. So there's a few of them doing it. But there's then no repercussions in terms of that's fraud and they're earning money illegitimately, but there's no repercussions on the person who's doing that. They're knowingly doing it wrong, but there's nothing that goes on. So you can do all this verification, but you can't stop human behaviour of
No, it's true.
off you go.
You can't. Until you kind of ring up the parent and say, you seem to be losing an awful lot of money, and they realise what's been going on, that they've probably not really truly understood the implications of allowing this to happen. That's a bit more serious than answering a survey. But I think it comes down again to the fact that you haven't established a clear contract with the person who signed up to the panel. And they're like, well, it doesn't really matter who answers this because, I can get my 8-year-old to answer the questions, who cares? There's no investment on the part of the respondent to actually be truthful. And I think that's something we discussed early on, was how do we get to truth? Then have a philosophical debate about, well, what is truth? Is the truth from an 8-year-old the same as the truth from his parents? But yeah, that's basically where we're trying to get to, is to make sure that a respondent understands what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and why it's important for them to answer it and not their 8-year-old.
I was going to say, one of the other things as well is it's kind of follow on from that comment, is we did some research a number of years ago now, but looking at consents that had been gained from responsible adults for their children to take part in research, so a slightly different way round. Nearly 50% of those consents were false. They were the children who had used their parents' accounts to say that they could take part because they wanted to get the incentive. So, I mean, this kind of more devious behaviour of participants, whether it is the adults or the children, has been with us for a long time. That is not a new issue. And so whatever we do, we cannot eradicate that kind of behaviour in terms of wanting to game the system. What we can do is try to reduce it as much as possible. But we will never get to a point where we have 100%, that everything is, the veracity is absolutely there. We're never going to be there.
I wonder, back to what we were talking earlier about different types of research, whether or not that type of behaviour, with a parent letting their children do it, would they do that if it was the crime survey or a social survey? Or was it really just BMW and those sort of surveys where they don't really think that the data matters anyway? Okay, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but we've got time for one more.
I was just really going to pick up on the point you just made about who cares, and that's been a theme that's run through an awful lot of what we're saying here, and we're talking about a value exchange, a social contract, and for many of us, we don't care enough. As researchers, as buyers of research, we don't care enough about the participant, we don't know who they are, we don't speak to them, we just churn this thing through, and that is the heart, to my mind, of the problem here, and we won't level up anywhere unless we start to care an awful lot more.
I just want to make an observation to your comment, Pete. It's interesting is that the one group of people involved in research that I think care much more about participants are interviewers, because they're the ones who are sitting in their home talking to them and will get to know these people and understand these people. And we need to also value the fact that actually I think interviewers have got something to be able to give us, to learn from, and that we should take some of that, get more of that feedback loop from some of those interviewers, because they have something to give.
So I suppose my final question, maybe even a rhetorical one, but is it too late? Can we change?
I'm an optimist. I am an optimist by nature, and I think that if once you've acknowledged a problem, that's by far and away means you're on the right track. If we weren't talking about these issues today and just trying to brush them under the carpet, which, let's face it, there's been some of that in the past, then I would be feeling much more pessimistic. But we're talking about it. We're sharing things. We're creating new solutions. We're working together. We're collaborating, as Mel as quite rightly talked about earlier today. For me, that means we're on the path. We're at the foothills of solutions, but at least we are going towards solutions. If it was too late, we might as well pack up and go home now. And we've got lunch to come.
I would say it has to involve the client, right? The end brand. It has to, because I remember when I was in advertising, somebody's KPI or sort of, quarterly bonus is based on the results of the tracker that was. And so, they're hugely motivated by it. They don't really give them monkeys, like how you got to the answer, who was, do you know what I mean? I don't care. It doesn't impact me. The only thing I need is my quarterly bonus at the end. And if that's the system that we're caught up in, then that can't change without that being sort of uncoupled and changed, right? So there are ways and pockets of change and innovation and new ways of working, but ultimately that big, broad brushstroke stuff, just go to synthetics in the end, because what does it matter, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I think that's how I see it.
I think the good news really is that clients are always looking for the next big thing. Virtual reality seems to have gone. So, what's the next big thing? How can market research, how can the market research industry come up with something that clients are going to go, I've got to have that. Fear of missing out. I must have that super quant. Whatever you're going to call it. And as we said, sort of lift the bar and get clients to say, yes, I understand what's going on, and I am going to take the lead. I mean, I see this a lot with my clients. If I say to them, look, the Hoosier Lottery in Indianapolis, they're doing this. This is really great. You should all be doing that too. And they kind of go, right. I want some of that brand aura from something that's good and not synthetic and high quality and all of that. But you've got to educate them. You've got to create that fear of missing out.
Okay, right, we're going to wrap it up there. I'm not sure I'm feeling completely optimistic, but I think as Deborah says, we are talking about it. We're all here in the room, so, that must mean that we are hopefully going to move it forward. Thank you very much, Debrah, Shifra, and Susan. Not Susan. Thank you all as well for your participation.